5 seconds to go. Mr. Vice Chairman, sir, I rise to support the Plantations Labour Amendment Bill brought up by the government for our consideration. Sir, the sad plight of millions of toiling people who sweat on various plantations in the country to earn valuable foreign exchange for us is really too much to be expressed in words. These workers live and work in most inhuman and pitiable conditions. These plantations include tea, coffee, cinchona, rubber, etc. And as we know, tea alone is one of the major foreign exchange earners of our country. But, sir, it is indeed most regrettable that notwithstanding a lapse of 34 years since our independence, these workers who earn crores and crores of rupees by way of foreign exchange have to live in most miserable conditions. They live in houses that are most insecure and collapse frequently, and when these workers die as a result of these collapses, their guardians or their dependents do not get even due compensation for the loss that they have to bear. Unhygienic living in distant and far-flung areas, compounded with lack of medical and educational facilities, make their life utterly miserable. These plantation workers have to live in abject poverty like slaves of their employers. And as we know, most of these plantations are still foreign-owned establishments, last vestiges of the colonial rule, the British rule, and as I said, it is a matter of deep regret for all of us that despite enacting an act, the Plantations Labour Act 1951, we have not yet been able to effect any improvement in their conditions. I think the employers alone are not responsible for their miserable condition. We are also as much responsible as they are, because although we could enforce the enactment and we could improve their conditions much earlier, we have failed in doing so. Sir, on the 9th May 1973, this House, the Rajya Sabha, decided that a joint committee should be appointed to look into the desired amendment and put up a draft as early as possible for our consideration. On the 26th May 1973, the Lok Sabha also adopted our resolution, our motion, with the result that a 45-member committee in which 15 representatives were from the Rajya Sabha and 30 from the Lok Sabha was appointed to look into this matter. This committee was to submit its report on the first day of the 85th session of the Rajya Sabha, that was in 1973. But this committee had to be granted 3 extensions, and the said report was ultimately available on the 3rd March 1975. At that time, as we all know, the so-called JP's movement of total revolution was at its peak. Within 2 or 3 months, the national emergency had to be declared, and during the emergency, priorities had changed and we could not just effect this desired improvement at that time, and we could not bring about this legislation. And then the Janata rule and the Lok Dal rule. For 30 months they were in power, but they too, although they tried to pose to be the champions of the downtrodden and the workers, failed to deliver the goods, and that is why today we are going to consider the report of that committee that was presented to the government in 1975. Therefore, we are also equally responsible for not ameliorating their conditions and their plight. The committee had to consider 120 memoranda giving views and suggestions from various unions and associations, and 59 witnesses appeared before the committee, and that committee itself came to the conclusion that in various areas even the barest minimum facilities such as arrangement for supply of wholesome drinking water, latrines, urinals, provision of qualified doctors had not been provided, though these amenities are a must under the Act. The Act has been there, but we could not enforce it, we could not implement it, only because the employers did not want it. They did not want to give to the workers due justice. Inadequacy of punishments that are awarded under the Act is one of the main impediments standing in the way of implementation of various welfare measures. Courts generally take a lenient view of the offences under the Act, and they let off the employers who are offenders with lighter punishment, which generally amounts to a fine of rupees 100. So, the committee suggested amendment to section 36 of the Act. An employer is required to provide these workers living accommodation, but generally, in spite of the fact that the government gives loans and subsidies to the employers for construction of houses, progress in regard to these constructions is very poor. As I said earlier, very unhygienic and insecure houses are there where these people have to live. Even compensation to the workers in the event of house collapse is not given. Stop. दोस्तों इसी के साथ ही डिक्टेशन फिनिश होती है. डिक्टेशन काफ़ी अच्छी है, वर्ड्स काफ़ी अच्छे आए हैं, बट जो वर्ड्स इसमें हैं उनके काफ़ी सारे शॉर्ट आउटलाइंस भी मैंने प्रोवाइड किए हुए हैं ऑलरेडी. तो जो शॉर्ट आउटलाइंस की प्लेलिस्ट है आप उसे देखिए, आपको बहुत सारे वर्ड्स ऐसे मिलेंगे जो आप इजीली बना सकते हैं. इतने बड़े बड़े आपको उनकी आउटलाइंस बनाने की आवश्यकता नहीं है. तो अब आपसे मुलाकात करूंगा मैं अगली क्लास में अगले ट्रांसक्रिप्शन के साथ. तब तक के लिए बाय बाय, टेक केयर.